"Don't go to that meeting, Mr. Harlan," the girl said. She couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and she was standing in the middle of his driveway in rubber boots that were 2 sizes too big, holding a muddy stick like it was something important. "Please, don't go." Walter Harlan had been a corporate lawyer for 31 years. He had stood in front of judges, arbitration panels, and boards of directors that could end careers with a single vote. He did not stop for children in driveways. He did not rearrange his schedule because of muddy boots or wide, frightened eyes. And yet, he stopped. The morning was gray and cool, the kind of October morning that smelled like wet leaves and coming frost. His briefcase was in his hand. His car was running. He had a 9 o'clock meeting 40 minutes away at the Lakeview Inn Conference Center, a meeting he had been preparing for the better part of 3 weeks. His firm's senior partners were expecting him. His client was expecting him. Everything was in order. He looked down at the girl. She was the daughter of his housekeeper, Bev, who came on Tuesday and Friday mornings. He had met the child twice before, once when Bev had brought her during a school closure, and once when she had waited on the porch while her mother finished up inside. Her name was Poppy. He remembered that because it had struck him as an unusual name, the kind that belonged to a different era. "Poppy," he said carefully, "does your mother know you're out here?" The girl shook her head. Her eyes didn't move from his face. "She's inside. She doesn't know I came out." She took a step closer. "But I heard something, Mr. Harlan, last night, and I didn't sleep because I didn't know if I should tell you. And then I saw your car, and I thought if I didn't say it now, I might not ever say it." Walter set his briefcase down on the stone step. He looked back at the front door, half expecting Bev to appear. The door stayed closed. "What did you hear?" he asked. Poppy looked down at her boots. She pressed the stick into the gravel once, twice. Then she looked back up. "My mom had a phone call last night, late. I wasn't supposed to be awake," she swallowed. "The person she was talking to, they said your name. And they said the meeting. And they said something about making sure you didn't leave." The words landed strangely. Walter's first instinct was to rationalize. Children misheard things. Children took fragments of adult conversations and reassembled them into something alarming, the way they assembled nightmares out of ordinary shadows. Bev had worked for him for 6 years. She was reliable, discreet, and honest to a degree that sometimes made him vaguely uncomfortable, the way real honesty often did. "Making sure I didn't leave," he repeated. "That's what they said." Poppy's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white around the stick. "And the other person, the one calling," they laughed, "and my mom said, 'He won't see it coming.'" Walter stood very still. The engine of his car idled in the driveway. A crow called from somewhere in the birch trees along the property line. The sound of it was very loud. He picked up his briefcase. He turned off the car. He went back inside. He did not go to Bev. That was his first instinct. To walk into the kitchen where she was cleaning and ask her directly what she had said on the phone the previous night. He was a lawyer. He had spent 3 decades asking direct questions. But something made him hesitate, and he had learned over the years to pay attention to hesitation. Hesitation, he had found, was often intelligence presenting itself before the conscious mind had finished its reasoning. Instead, he went to his office, and he closed the door, and he sat down at his desk, and he thought. The meeting at the Lakeview Inn had been arranged by his colleague, Dennis Arcand. Dennis had come to the firm 11 years ago, made partner 8 years after that, and in the past 2 years had gradually, almost imperceptibly, positioned himself as the de facto lead on several of the firm's most lucrative files. Files that had originally belonged to Walter. The shift had happened slowly enough that Walter had not fully noticed it until he was reviewing billings last spring and found, to his considerable discomfort, that his name appeared on a great deal of the groundwork and almost none of the credit. He had confronted Dennis about it once, in a conversation that had been entirely civil and entirely useless. Dennis had smiled and said something about team effort and evolving client relationships, and Walter had left that conversation feeling, for the first time in his professional life, genuinely outmaneuvered. The meeting today was ostensibly about the Fenwick estate, a large client, a complex file, a wealthy family with competing interests, and the kind of grievances that had been accumulating for 20 years. Walter had done the original estate planning for Edmund Fenwick a decade ago. He knew the file better than anyone. He should have been the lead. Dennis had called him 2 weeks ago. "I need you there, Walt. The family trusts you. You're the face they want to see." It had sounded like deference. Now, sitting in his office with the sound of Poppy's voice still in his ears, Walter wondered whether it had been something else entirely. He opened his laptop. He pulled up the firm's internal file system. He started reading. He read for 2 hours. What he found was not dramatic. There were no falsified documents, no obvious fraud, nothing that would have been immediately visible to anyone not looking carefully. But Walter had spent 31 years looking carefully, and what he found piece by piece was a picture that disturbed him deeply. Over the past 18 months, Dennis had been quietly restructuring several client files, not illegally, not obviously, but in ways that shifted both authority and financial benefit away from Walter and toward a parallel structure that appeared, on close examination, to involve a numbered company that Walter had never heard of. The Fenwick file in particular had seen a series of amendments to account structures. Amendments that Walter had been copied on, but that had been buried in the kind of administrative email traffic that a busy senior partner could easily scan and miss. If Walter attended today's meeting, if he sat at that table as the trusted face while Dennis directed proceedings, there was a good chance he would, without fully understanding it, authorize something he had not actually agreed to. His presence would be used, his credibility would be spent, and when questions were eventually asked, his name would be on the paperwork. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then he called his assistant, Claire, and told her he would not be attending the 9 o'clock. He told her to send his regrets without explanation. He called a colleague he trusted absolutely, a woman named Frances Tate, who practiced at a firm across the city and owed him nothing, and he asked her to quietly review everything he had just found. He did not call Dennis. Bev left at noon, as she always did on Tuesday. Walter watched her car pull out of the driveway from the window of his office. Poppy was in the back seat, and for a moment the girl turned and looked at the house, and their eyes met through the glass. Walter raised his hand. Poppy raised hers. He thought about what kind of courage it took to stand in someone's driveway in oversized boots and say a thing you weren't sure anyone would believe. He thought it was probably more courage than most adults managed. Frances called him at 4:30. She had spent 3 hours going through what he'd sent her, and when she spoke, her voice had the particular quality it got when she was angry and controlling it. "Walter," she said, "how long have you known Dennis Arcand?" 11 years. And in those 11 years, did he ever give you reason to think he was capable of this? Walter considered the question honestly. He gave me reason to think he was ambitious, he said. I didn't take it seriously enough. Frances was quiet for a moment. What you have here, it's not enough on its own, not yet. But it's enough to start a proper investigation. And if what I'm seeing in the Fenwick amendments is what I think it is, you are very lucky you weren't in that room today. I know. Who told you? He thought of Poppy's rubber boots, the way she had pressed that muddy stick into the gravel, working up the nerve. Someone I underestimated, he said. What followed was not quick, and it was not clean, and anyone who expected the justice of a tidy resolution had clearly not spent time in the legal profession. The Law Society investigation took 4 months. Dennis, when confronted, denied everything with a fluency that suggested he had been prepared for exactly this moment. His lawyer was excellent. The numbered company was a maze. But Walter was patient. He had always been patient. It was, he thought, one of the few virtues that actually compounded with age. Frances worked with him methodically. They reconstructed the paper trail piece by piece. They interviewed 3 junior associates who had been asked, separately, to draft documents they found odd and had said nothing because they were junior associates. And Dennis Arcand was a partner. They found a second numbered company connected to the first. They found an account in Dennis's wife's name that had received transfers from a client trust account on 4 separate occasions. That was the one that ended it. Dennis resigned from the firm in February. He surrendered his license to practice in March. Walter was told by the Law Society investigator, in a tone that suggested this was somehow meant to be comforting, that this sort of thing was more common than the public realized. Walter did not find that comforting. He found it exhausting and sad. What he found comforting, oddly, was a conversation he had in December at Bev's kitchen table. He had asked her, after everything was settled enough that he felt he could, about the phone call. Bev had put her mug down. She looked at him steadily. Dennis Arcand's assistant called me in September, she said. She told me they were planning a surprise retirement dinner for you, said they needed to make sure you'd be at the Lakeview meeting so they could get you there, without you knowing. And then the real event was somewhere else. She paused. She was very convincing. What made you hesitate? She called at 10:30 at night, Bev said. People who are planning a retirement party don't call the subject's housekeeper at 10:30 at night. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I told her I would do what I could, and then I didn't do anything. I wasn't going to help them with something I didn't understand, and I didn't want to worry you with something I couldn't prove. But Poppy heard. Bev's expression shifted into something Walter couldn't entirely read. Poppy hears everything, she said, simply. She always has. Walter thought about that for a moment. She told me not to go, he said. She came out in the driveway at 7:30 in the morning, and she told me not to go. Bev nodded slowly. She looked toward the window, where the December light was coming in flat and white. She told me that night, Bev said, after the call. She came into my room and she said, "Mom, that call was wrong. I could feel it, and I told her she was right, that I wasn't going to do anything with it. And she said, 'What about Mr. Harlan?' And I said he was a grown man and a lawyer, and he would be fine." She paused. She didn't say anything else. I thought she had let it go. She hadn't. No, Bev said. She hadn't. They sat with that for a moment. "She's going to be something," Walter said. "Whatever she decides to do." Bev looked at him with the particular expression of a mother who has heard this said about her child by people who mean well but will move on and forget. "She already is something," she said, quietly. Walter nodded. He thought that was exactly right. He restructured his practice that spring. He took on fewer files, chose them more carefully. He brought in 2 junior partners whose work he had watched for years and trusted. One of them was an associate named Paul Okafor, who had been one of the 3 juniors uncomfortable with the documents Dennis had asked him to draft, and who had, once the investigation began, been the first to speak fully and on record. The firm was smaller than it had been. It was also, Walter found, easier to breathe in. He sent Poppy's school a check for the spring fundraiser, which Bev mentioned in passing was for new books for the library. He sent it anonymously, though he suspected Bev knew. He didn't think that mattered. What mattered was simpler than the things he had spent most of his career pursuing. It was the thing he kept coming back to in the quiet moments. Early morning, when the birch trees were losing the last of their snow and the light was coming back, and he could sit at his desk with coffee and feel, without apology, grateful. He had been stopped in his driveway by a 9-year-old in oversized boots who had decided, in the dark of the previous night, that a thing worth knowing was worth saying out loud, even if nobody believed her. Even if the man she was saying it to was a stranger, more or less. Even if she had everything to lose and no particular reason to think she had anything to offer. She had offered it anyway. Walter Harlan had been a lawyer for 31 years, and he had learned in that time to measure people by the quality of their judgment under pressure. He had known judges he respected and partners he admired and clients whose clarity in crisis had genuinely moved him. He had never, in all that time, known anyone with better instincts than a 9-year-old girl standing in a gravel driveway at 7:30 in the morning, holding a muddy stick, telling the truth about something she couldn't fully explain, and refusing to look away until someone listened. He didn't let himself forget that. He kept it close, the way you keep things that have actually changed you, not as a lesson exactly, but as a reminder of how much you can miss when you're certain you already know where the important things are coming from.